Hi, I'm Ken VanDine, Engineering Manager for Ubuntu Desktop at Canonical. We recently invested in enabling Linux support in Flutter for Desktop. Today, I'd like to give some background into why we chose Flutter and why we will continue contributing to Flutter. But let's back up just a little and talk a little bit about Linux and how Ubuntu fits in. Everybody's heard of Linux at this point. It's literally everywhere you look these days. Everything from cloud to IoT devices are powered by Linux. Most developers have heard of Ubuntu. But anybody not familiar, Ubuntu is a distribution of Linux. A Linux distribution is an operating system made from a collection of software that is based upon the Linux kernel. Now, I know this is getting down into the weeds a little bit, but it's an important point. It's important for a point I'll make later about this collection of software. There are many Linux distributions, each of which work to bring their own value to the product. And let's talk about Ubuntu's mission and how we bring this value. The Ubuntu desktop vision is an operating system available to anyone, developed for everyone, that will just work for anything you need. Now, that's a lofty goal. I know. It's huge. Literally anything. But really, Ubuntu's tagline probably says it best: Linux for human beings. We work very hard to not only keep things simple enough to be useful for as many users as possible, but we work to make the broadest variety of software available to our users. Now let's look at a concrete example. There's plenty of free and open source music players out there. However, many users want Spotify. Just an example. They use Spotify on their mobile devices, their TVs, in their car, etc. So surely Spotify would be a welcome addition to the desktop. This is where Snaps and the Snap Store comes in, which I'll talk about a little bit more later. We've created a universal app store for Linux, which makes a wide variety of applications available to most Linux distributions from a single store. Spotify has published their desktop application to the Snap Store, making it available to millions of Linux users via the Snap Store. Android has the Play Store, Linux has the Snap Store. But Spotify is not a Flutter app. Why are we talking about this? It's just a great example of a well-known application vendor bringing their app to Linux in a meaningful way. Now let's fast forward a little bit to Google's announcement of their plans to enable desktop application development in Flutter. This has huge potential for bringing high-quality applications to the Linux desktop. While Flutter is relatively young, there have been some very interesting apps built with Flutter already, and we see great potential here. There's a number of things about Flutter that were exciting for us. Fast-growing ecosystem of application developers. Traditionally, desktop application toolkits for Linux have been relatively niche. GDK, Qt are very well known in the Linux space for graphical toolkits for creating graphical desktop apps. And they're technically cross-platform. These will work on Windows and other platforms as well. However, that's really never been appealing to the non-Linux developer. Unless you're already developing an app, if you're already developing an app for Linux, these are great choices, but it's not appealing on other platforms. Flutter has a rapidly growing developer base for Android, iOS, and Mac. So why not leverage that on Linux? It's multi-platform, as I touched on in the last slide. Develop once, run anywhere. So mobile, Android and iOS already supported. Desktop, Mac was already supported at the time they made their announcement last year. We've now enabled support for Linux, and Windows support is coming as well. There's also web, which means you can run anywhere. So you can create your Flutter app as a web app. So this is very appealing as an app developer to be able to write your app one time and be able to run it in all of these places. So we feel that it's a very compelling argument for supporting Flutter on Linux. highly optimized native applications. Flutter combines native performance and quality with high-velocity development while maintaining multi-platform reach. So really, it means it's available on all platforms. Let's enable that for Linux so we can be part of that ecosystem. It's modern. Flutter has everything you would expect in a modern toolkit. It's declarative, it's reactive, etc. Rapid development and prototyping. I mean, seriously, check out Hot Reload. It's amazing. It's very modern. We love that. Very rich in integration with most popular development environments out there. Visual Studio Code, Android Studio, IntelliJ, etc. We saw all of this as very compelling for an app ecosystem. So why does Canonical stroke Ubuntu care about third-party application development? We're a Linux distribution. Well, we see a thriving application developer ecosystem as a vital part in the future of Linux for human beings. It's critical that we enable application developers to create high-quality and useful apps that target Linux. The reality is, a serious app developer, they want their software in front of as many users as possible. With Flutter, these developers can quite easily create Linux builds of their existing or future Flutter applications that they choose to build. And they can publish those in the Snap Store, making it available to millions of Linux users with minimal effort, while still being available on other platforms. It's just a win, right? To that end, we have made a significant investment in enabling Linux support in Flutter for desktop, which has had its first alpha release in July. We have a team that is continuing to work beyond the alpha, working towards a beta release. We are dedicated to delivering a first-class Flutter developer experience for Linux. Earlier, I mentioned this collection of software that makes up a Linux distribution. Well, I feel this collection is much more than just the default set of applications that are included when you install Ubuntu for the first time. It's really the ability for every user to find the software that they need to learn, work, and play on their desktop or laptop. So really, I would encourage anyone that's developing a Flutter application to try to build for Linux. You can find instructions on how to do that following some links at the end of this presentation. Google and Canonical are also partnering to run a virtual event this November focused on helping developers build their applications for Linux. You can follow us on social media for details, but it should be sometime mid-November. Details will come very soon. All right, well, thank you very much. I hope you enjoyed it. Making some links available here. Hopefully those can be made available on the conference site somewhere as well. Thank you very much.